I was halfway through reviewing the quarterly sales data when Mason stormed into my office. No knock, no courtesy, just a loud, deliberate entrance meant to rattle. Typical. "Elena," he barked, tossing a file onto my desk. "We need to talk now." I glanced at the folder, then at the man I'd worked under for the last 4 years. Mason Reed, the kind of man who never looked twice at women in the office unless he needed coffee or someone to organize his calendar. He liked power, and more than that, he liked reminding others that he had it. Still, I stayed calm. I always did. "Of course," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. He didn't sit. Instead, he loomed. "The board's decided to restructure the leadership team. We're moving in a different direction. And frankly, we need people who can lead, not just follow spreadsheets." I blinked, stunned for half a second. "You're firing me?" He smirked like he just sunk a game-winning shot. "Let's not be dramatic. We're releasing you from your position effective immediately. No warning, no performance review, and certainly no recognition for the fact that my department had just delivered the highest revenue growth in 3 years." "I see," I said quietly. "May I ask why?" His tone was clipped. "You lack vision. You manage tasks, not people. And let's be honest, this industry, it needs strong leadership, assertiveness, confidence, traits you haven't exactly demonstrated." There it was, not even veiled. A dig at my gender wrapped in buzzwords and corporate fluff. He didn't see me as a leader, not because I hadn't delivered, but because I didn't fit his outdated mold. "I understand," I said, my voice steady, neutral. Mason narrowed his eyes, clearly thrown off by my composure. He expected outrage, maybe even tears. But I'd learned long ago how to control my emotions in boardrooms full of egos. "I'll need your badge and company laptop by the end of the day," he added. "It will disable your access by 5 p.m. HR has. Your severance details." I nodded and stood, extending my hand. "Thank you, Mason. I appreciate the clarity." He hesitated but shook my hand. "Good luck out there." As he turned and walked out, satisfied with his little coup, I sat back down and exhaled slowly. My hands didn't shake, my breath didn't quicken. In fact, I felt lighter. Because what Mason didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that I wasn't just a department head. 2 weeks ago, something changed, something big, and I had been waiting for the right moment to use it. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. My father smiling proudly at the ribbon-cutting ceremony on the day he opened the company's first regional office, the same company Mason had just released me from. I ran my fingers along the edge of the frame. "You told me to wait, Dad. Wait until the time was right." I stood and began packing my things. I didn't take much. Just a few personal items, a mug my team gave me last Christmas, and a stack of old notebooks filled with ideas that had never made it past Mason's desk. Outside, the office buzzed with quiet curiosity. A few coworkers gave me sympathetic glances. Others avoided eye contact. No one asked questions, but I saw the thoughts on their faces. Did she get fired? What did she do wrong? I left the building with a small, polite smile and no fanfare. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt the weight of 15 years inside that company slip off my shoulders. They thought they'd ended my career, but what they'd actually done was give me the green light. I reached for my phone and texted a single message to my lawyer. "It's time. Prepare everything." The reply came back almost instantly. "Understood. Shareholder meeting can be scheduled within 5 business days." I looked back at the glass building, glinting in the sun. Mason thought this was over, but he had no idea what was coming. The next time I walked into that boardroom, it wouldn't be as an employee. It would be as their majority shareholder. And the smile I wore that day would be real. 2 weeks earlier, I had sat in the quiet, wood-paneled office of my family's attorney, staring at a document I wasn't allowed to open until the clock struck 12 on my 30th birthday. My father had always loved theatrics. He said it made serious things feel significant, and this apparently was one of them. "Elena, Mr. James Harrington, our longtime family lawyer, had said with a warm, fatherly tone, "Your father left very clear instructions. You're not to open this envelope until your 30th birthday, not a day before." I had smiled politely, half curious, half amused. "What is it? Some kind of delayed birthday card?" He gave me a look that told me he knew, and that he wasn't about to spoil the surprise. "Your father was a man of vision," he said instead. "And he trusted you more than anyone." That sentence stayed with me in the days that followed. My father, the founder and former CEO of the very feish company that had just let me go without ceremony, had always believed in foresight, in planning ahead, and he believed in me. When he passed away 5 years ago, the company changed. It became colder, more calculated, less about the people, and more about the numbers. Mason had joined shortly after, charming the board, flexing his MBA, and slowly dismantling the culture my father had built. I'd stayed, thinking I could protect what remained. But now I realized my father had known something like this might happen, and he'd prepared for it. On the morning of my birthday, I opened the envelope alone, sitting in the same spot where he used to read the paper every Sunday, sunlight streaming through the window, a quiet warmth in the air. Inside was a letter and a formal document with embossed seals. I unfolded the letter first. It was handwritten in my father's neat script. Elena, if you're reading this, you've turned 30, and that means you're ready. I never doubted it. Not for a second. You've spent your life working twice as hard for half the recognition. I saw it even when you thought I didn't. I saw the sacrifices, the late nights, the integrity no one else noticed. I also saw how the company changed after I left, and I knew there might come a time when you'd need more than a seat at the table. So, I gave you the table. I paused, blinking hard. My hands trembled slightly as I turned to the document behind the letter. It was a trust agreement, filed and notarized. According to the trust, 90% of the company shares my father had retained when he stepped down had been placed under my name, held until I turned 30 with full voting rights activated immediately. 90%. I read it 3 times, then once more just to be sure I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't just a shareholder. I was the majority owner, the controlling shareholder. My entire body buzzed with disbelief, adrenaline, and something else. Power. Quiet, measured, undeniable power. I called Harrington immediately. Is this real? I asked, barely able to get the words out. Yes, he replied simply. Your father structured the trust to avoid public filings. It was airtight. The board has no idea, unless you choose to tell them. Why didn't he activate it sooner? He wanted you to experience the company on your own terms first, to see who would reveal themselves, to decide if you wanted it before you used it. That line hit me hard. I'd spent years being underestimated, overlooked, talked over in meetings. I'd watched Mason get praised for ideas I'd quietly suggested, watched male colleagues rise faster despite doing less. I'd smiled through it all, thinking patience and hard work would pay off. Now I realized it hadn't been time that was missing. It was leverage. And suddenly, I had it. I scheduled a follow-up with Harrington for the next day. Let's talk about what comes next, I said. He didn't miss a beat. We'll prepare the documents to call for a shareholders meeting. We'll notify the board once everything's ready. Don't notify them yet, I said. Not until I give the word. There was a pause on the line. Elena, may I ask what you're planning? I looked out the window of my apartment, watching the traffic roll by. People rushing, unaware that everything was about to change. I'm planning to walk into that boardroom, I said calmly, and show them exactly who they tried to fire. I didn't show up for the mandatory exit interview. HR called twice, then emailed. I ignored them both. Instead, I sat in the quiet corner booth of a discreet downtown cafe, sipping a flat white while Harrington reviewed the final draft of the shareholder meeting request. It was official now. On paper, I held 90% of the company's voting power, a legal and financial reality Mason would never have seen coming. You sure you're ready? Harrington asked, adjusting his glasses as he slid the documents across the table. Once you submit this, you'll be throwing a grenade into their boardroom. I looked him in the eye, my voice steady. They pulled the pin the moment they fired me. He gave a small nod. Fair enough. The documents were simple, as most powerful things often are. A formal notice of a special shareholder meeting with a single agenda item, leadership review and appointment of new executive management. Mason wouldn't be expecting it. That was the point. His entire style was built on control through confidence. He bulldozed meetings with jargon, steamrolled quieter voices, and weaponized charm when needed. The board, mostly older men who liked his bravado, had let him run unchecked for too long. They'd soon discover how fragile that kind of power really was. I'll serve them notice Friday morning, Harrington continued. The meeting will be set for Tuesday. That gives them 2 business days to panic. I couldn't help but smile. Perfect. That afternoon, I sat down with Caroline Winters, the trustee who had managed the shares since my father's passing. She was sharp, discreet, and had a memory like steel. "I've watched that man dismantle your father's legacy brick by brick," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "You don't owe him politeness." Inside the folder was everything I'd need for Tuesday. Ownership certificates, voting records, and a detailed summary of company performance under Mason's leadership, declining employee satisfaction scores, rising turnover, overspending on executive perks, and a flattening revenue trajectory despite a growing market. "He's been hiding under inflated projections," Caroline said flatly. "If this continues, he'll drive the company into the ground within 2 years." I nodded, absorbing every word. "I'll let the numbers speak for themselves." As I left her office, I walked past the mural in the hallway, an oil painting of my father standing in front of the first company headquarters. He was younger in the painting than I ever remembered him in life. His hand rested on the shoulder of a small girl in a red dress. Me. He believed in legacy and in people, and even though he wasn't here anymore, I could still feel his hand on my shoulder. By Monday morning, the buzz around my sudden disappearance had turned into full-blown rumors. I got texts from former colleagues. "What happened? Did you quit?" "Mason's acting like nothing happened, but HR is weirdly tight-lipped. Whatever you did, I hope you're okay." I didn't respond. Not yet. The silence was part of the plan. I wanted Mason confident, certain he'd erased me from the story. Let him play king a little longer. Let him underestimate me one last time. That evening, I stood in front of my mirror, trying on the navy suit I'd bought for special occasions but never worn. It was sharp, tailored, clean, the kind of outfit you wear when you walk into a room not to ask for power, but to own it. I practiced what I'd say. Not a speech, just a few lines, precise, measured, undeniable. The truth would do most of the work for me. Tuesday morning arrived crisp and cool. The city bustled as usual, unaware that inside one boardroom, everything was about to change. I arrived 10 minutes early, walking past the receptionist with quiet confidence. She did a double take, but didn't stop me. Upstairs, the boardroom lights were already on. I could see movement through the frosted glass. Harrington met me by the elevators, his expression unreadable but calm. "They're in there," he said. "Mason's already speaking. He thinks this is just another quarterly strategy review. Not for long." I took a slow breath, smoothed the front of my jacket, and stepped forward. The door to the boardroom opened with a soft click. Heads turned, conversation stilled. Mason mid-sentence froze when he saw me. "Elena," he said, eyebrows arching. "This meeting is for board members only." I smiled politely, setting the ownership documents on the table. "Exactly." Then I took my seat at the head of the table. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. Mason stared at me from the far end of the long oak table, confusion flickering across his face, followed by disbelief. I could practically see the gears turning in his head, trying to place me back in the box he thought he'd locked me in last week. "Elena," he said again, voice sharp now. "This is a board meeting. As I already mentioned, employees are not permitted." "I'm not here as an employee," I said calmly. "I'm here as the majority shareholder." That one sentence shifted the entire energy of the room. Board members glanced at one another, some stiffening, others sitting forward with interest. One of them, William Dalton, who had been with the company since my father's days, looked down at the document I'd placed in front of him, then back up at me with raised eyebrows. "Is this accurate?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "It is," I replied. 90% of the company's shares were transferred to me through a family trust when I turned 30. All paperwork is in order, filed, notarized, and submitted in accordance with corporate governance. Mason looked from me to Harrington, who was calmly unfolding a copy of the ownership certificate and handing it to the board secretary. "You can't be serious," Mason scoffed, his voice rising. "This is absurd." "Why would your father?" "Because he trusted me," I interrupted, "and because he knew exactly what this company would become without oversight." The room was still again. Everyone knew what I meant, even if I didn't say it outright. Since my father's death, Mason had turned the culture toxic. He rewarded loyalty over competence, appearance over results, and the numbers had started to show it. "Let's get to the point," I continued, opening the second folder I'd brought. "As majority shareholder, I've called this special meeting to review the current executive leadership, including the position of Chief Executive Officer. Mason stood now, his face flushed. This is a coup, a personal vendetta. You think you can waltz in here? I'm not asking, I said, finally raising my voice just enough to command the room. I'm exercising my rights. Then I slid the financial report across the table. Let's talk about performance. I didn't need theatrics. The numbers spoke for themselves. Employee satisfaction down 38% in 2 years. Turnover in key departments up 47%. 3 highly credible discrimination complaints under HR review. Flat revenue growth in a market that was booming. I've compiled testimony from department heads, employee surveys, and financial audits. I've also documented misuse of company funds, unauthorized travel, excessive executive bonuses, and misleading investor reports. I glanced at Mason. All signed off under your leadership. Board members began flipping through the pages. William Dalton looked genuinely disturbed. The CFO, who had sat quietly until now, leaned over to whisper something to the general counsel, who immediately began typing on his tablet. Mason's jaw clenched. You're twisting data to make your little revenge fantasy look legitimate. I don't need to twist anything, I said. I have evidence. You relied on the assumption that no one powerful enough would ever question you. That assumption ends today. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Effective immediately, I said, pulling out the final document. I am submitting a motion to remove Mason Reed as CEO of this company. As majority shareholder, my vote is sufficient to carry the motion. The board secretary looked stunned. You don't need a second vote. I own 90%, I said simply. A majority by any definition. William Dalton cleared his throat. In accordance with company bylaws, the motion stands. Effective upon completion of documentation. Mason slammed a hand on the table. You can't do this. I already did. Security didn't need to be called. Mason didn't resist, but as he stormed out, his face a twisted mix of rage and disbelief, I noticed something remarkable. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked small. Once the door clicked shut behind him, I exhaled slowly and turned to face the rest of the board. This company deserves better, I said. So do its people. And starting today, that's exactly what they're going to get. William Dalton nodded slowly, a faint smile forming. Welcome back, Elena. By the end of the week, Mason's nameplate had been removed from the CEO's office door. I didn't move into the office immediately. I didn't need the symbolism of a bigger desk to confirm my position. I had something more important to do first. Rebuild the soul of the company my father started. The Monday following the shareholders' meeting, I called an all-hands staff meeting in the main conference hall. The same space where Mason had once paraded sales projections like war medals and handed out empty praise to the same handful of executives over and over again. But this time the energy was different. Curious, hesitant, hopeful. Employees filed in slowly, murmuring among themselves. The front rows were empty, as if no one wanted to seem too eager. Some looked nervous, others suspicious. They'd been burned before. I stood alone at the front of the room, holding no notes, no slides, just my truth. Some of you know me, I began. Some of you only know what you've been told. But let me start by saying this. I didn't come here to take power. I came here to restore trust. A few heads tilted. People were listening. For years, this company ran on the strength of its people, on your ideas, your late nights, your belief that what we were building mattered, and somewhere along the way that got lost. I paused, letting the silence fill the room. I was fired last week, I said, smiling faintly. Told I wasn't what this company needed, that I lacked the leadership to take us into the future. A few people chuckled nervously at first, but the nose. Tension began to shift. My honesty was disarming them. I didn't fight back. Not then, because I knew something Mason didn't. That leadership isn't about volume or vanity. It's about vision and respect and lifting the people who actually do the work. I looked out over the crowd, locking eyes with a few familiar faces. Engineers I'd worked alongside for years. Assistants who were always overlooked. Junior analysts who had been stuck under layers of corporate ego. Starting today, everything changes. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something radical. I listened. I met with department heads, team leads, interns, receptionists, custodial staff. I asked what wasn't working. I asked what they needed. I asked who they thought deserved more than they were getting. And then I acted. I promoted Maya Thompson from the customer service team to head of client experience, a role she'd unofficially been doing for a year while her actual manager took credit for every success. I brought back Kevin Harper, a brilliant product developer who had resigned after being repeatedly passed over for promotion in favor of less qualified men. I restructured HR entirely. The complaints that had gathered dust in forgotten folders, I read every single one. Several mid-level managers were quietly let go within the first week. People who had cultivated cultures of fear and favoritism under Mason's watch. Then I launched something my father had once dreamed of, the People First Initiative, a new internal program to recognize innovation, reward collaboration, and promote equity, no matter the job title. No more whisper networks, no more glass ceilings, just good people doing great work and finally getting credit for it. Late one evening, I walked the halls of the office alone. The energy was different now. Softer, brighter. The break room had laughter again. People were staying late because they wanted to, not because they feared what would happen if they didn't. Desks were decorated again. Photos of families, plants, personality, things that had slowly disappeared under Mason's reign. In one quiet hallway, I passed a whiteboard near the engineering bullpen. Someone had scrawled in blue marker. She came back. 3 simple words underlined twice. I stood there a moment reading it over and over. Not she took over, not she fired Mason. She came back. That mattered more than any title I now held. The following week, I finally moved into the CEO's office. Not because I needed the space, but because it was time. The nameplate was new. Sleek brushed steel with simple, elegant lettering. Elena Reed, Chief Executive Officer. I didn't bring much with me, just one framed photo. My father and I on the company's opening day, both smiling, both hopeful. I placed it on the corner of the desk and sat down, not with a sense of conquest, but of continuation. This wasn't just my company now. It was my responsibility, and I intended to honor it. It was exactly 1 year to the day since I'd been fired. 12 months since I walked out of this building with a cardboard box and a polite smile, dismissed as not what the company needed. 12 months since Mason had stripped me of my title, unaware that I held something far more powerful. And now, as I stood in front of the same glass doors, this time in a tailored suit, a sleek leather folder under my arm, and the full weight of the company's future resting on my shoulders, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not triumph, just peace. I nodded to the front desk receptionist, who now stood the moment I entered. "Morning, Miss Reed." "Elena, please," I said with a smile. "We're all on the same team." The elevators chimed softly as I rode to the top floor, what used to be Mason's domain. Now it was mine, but I hadn't remodeled it for show. I kept the original walnut desk, the same broad windows overlooking the city. What changed were the photos on the walls, images of our employees, of team retreats, of product launches led by names that had too often gone unrecognized. And on the far wall, directly behind my chair, hung a large portrait of my father, not as a monument to him, but as a reminder to me. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began reviewing the quarterly report. It was our strongest quarter in 5 years. Customer satisfaction up 23%. Employee retention up 41%. Revenue breaking records. But what mattered more was how we did it. Ethically, collaboratively, transparently. The company culture had shifted. People no longer whispered complaints over coffee. They spoke freely and were actually heard. Feedback loops were open. Diversity and leadership had doubled. We didn't just bring good people in. We finally gave them a place to grow. There was a soft knock on the door. "Come in," I said. It was Maya Thompson, now the head of client experience. Her eyes sparkled even behind her glasses. "You ready?" she asked. "They're waiting in the conference room." I stood, smoothing the front of my blazer. "Let's do it." The boardroom looked different now, too. Not in decor, but in presence. For the first time in company history, half the board were women. Several members were under 40. They brought new perspectives, asked harder questions, and made better decisions. At the center of the table sat Richard Hayes, one of our new strategic advisors. Brilliant mind, decent heart, the kind of person my father would have trusted. "Before we begin," Richard said, gesturing toward me, "Elena has a few words." I hadn't planned to speak, but standing there with every eye on me, not in judgment, but in respect, I realized something. This was the moment my father had prepared me for. "I want to thank you all," I said, "for believing in change, for making hard decisions when easy ones would have been safer, and for helping me rebuild a company that puts people before power." I paused, letting the words settle. "Someone once told me I lacked leadership," I continued, "but leadership isn't about volume or title. It's about vision, accountability, and the courage to do what's right, especially when it's inconvenient." I smiled, not for show, but for real. My father built this company with those values. I'm proud to say we're finally living up to them again. A quiet beat, then applause. Not thunderous, just warm, genuine, the kind that stays with you. That afternoon, I took the long way back to my office, walking through each department, the way I used to when I was just another face in the crowd. I stopped to check in with teams, to laugh with developers, to high-five marketing interns who just pulled off their first big campaign. In the break room, someone had baked cupcakes for an intern's last day. I took one, sat down among them, and talked about nothing important for 20 minutes. Because this wasn't just a company. It was a place where people felt they belonged, and that, more than stock prices or titles or revenge, was the real victory. Looking back on that year, I learned the deepest truth my father ever left me. Real power isn't inherited in shares or seized in boardrooms. It's earned in silence, through patience, integrity, and the quiet refusal to become what they expect. Mason never saw me because he only looked for mirrors of himself. The world told me to shout louder, fight dirtier, or cry victim. I chose none of those. I waited, prepared, and struck only when the truth could speak for itself. That single choice taught me that revenge is hollow, but justice timed perfectly is healing. True leadership isn't proving them wrong with noise. It's proving yourself right with results that no one can deny. The company is thriving now, not because I won, but because I finally removed the fear that was choking everyone else. The greatest inheritance wasn't 90% of the stock. It was the reminder that dignity, kept long enough, becomes unstoppable. I sit on the balcony of a small cafe perched in the heart of the city, sipping an espresso that still carries the warmth of the roaster, a faint steam curling upward like a whispered secret. Below me, the streets bustle, hurried footsteps clack against the pavement, murmured conversations blend into a low hum, a symphony of chaos I've grown to love. It's late afternoon, March 13th, 2025, and the sky is streaked with gold, the kind of light that makes even the grayest corners of this concrete jungle shimmer. My fingers rest lightly on the porcelain cup, the heat seeping into my skin, grounding me. An afternoon like any other, or so it seems. My phone vibrates against the wrought iron table, a sharp buzz cutting through the hum. The screen flashes a name, James, and I stare at it for a few seconds, a strange sense of unease creeping in, slow and cold, like a shadow stretching across the floor. James Carter, my husband of 12 years, co-founder of Mitchell Ventures, the man who thinks he knows me better than I know myself. I press answer, lifting the phone to my ear, and his voice comes through, sharp and odd, the way a blade sounds when it's unsheathed. "Daria," he says, and there's something in the way he lingers on my name. Too deliberate, too heavy. "I'm calling to tell you something." I don't respond. I wait. The city pulses below, a taxi horn blaring, a street vendor shouting about fresh pretzels. But here on this balcony, it's just me and the weight of his paws. My eyes trace the golden streaks stretching long shadows over the road, and I feel it. The shift, the moment before everything changes. "I want a divorce," he says finally, the words blunt, dropping like stones into still water. I let them ripple through the silence, my breath steady, my grip on the cup unfaltering. He's expecting something, a gasp, a plea, maybe a crack in my voice. But I give him nothing. Not yet. The espresso cools slightly in my hand, the city hums on, and I tilt my head, listening, waiting for the rest. Because with James, there's always more. He doesn't wait long to fill the silence. James never could stand it. I've sold the company, he says, his tone now thick with the confidence of a man who's just closed a deal he thinks unbeatable. Nicole and I are leaving to start over. Nicole. The name lands like a spark on dry grass. Nicole Evans, 34, all sharp edges and sharper ambition, the mistress he assumed I was too blind to see. I've known about her for months. Late-night texts he thought he'd hidden, expense reports for dinners I never ate, a red dress I glimpsed once in his car. But I say nothing, letting his words hang there, smug and heavy, while I decide not to feel, only to act. The espresso sits untouched now, a thin film forming on its surface, and I gaze out at the city, the evening sun dipping lower, casting the buildings in a fiery glow. Congratulations, I say, my voice light as air, almost a whisper, and on the other end of the line I hear his breath catch. Confusion, maybe, or the first crack in his certainty. He laughs then, a triumphant, smug sound that grates against my calm. I didn't think you'd take it this easily, he says, and I can picture him, 42 years old, leaning back in his office chair, tie loosened, that grin he wears when he thinks he's outsmarted everyone. You do realize, Daria, you have nothing left. The company's sold, and I own the majority of the assets. I glance at my watch. 4:47 p.m. Just a few more minutes. Is that what you think? I ask, my tone steady, a thread of steel woven through it. He nearly bursts into laughter, the sound tinny through the phone. Of course, everything's done. My lawyers have taken care of it all. I hope you won't make this difficult. Won't try to fight for something that's already lost. You know the law isn't on your side. The city below shifts into dusk, headlights flickering on like stars, and I smile slightly, not for him, but for me. He thinks he's holding all the cards. He has no idea I've been shuffling the deck this whole time. I hang up before he can react, the line going dead with a soft click. And in that moment, a smirk curls at the corner of my lips, small, private, mine. The cafe buzzes around me, a waiter clinking dishes, a couple laughing at the next table, but I'm already somewhere else. My mind racing ahead. I leave a crisp 10 on the table and step into the cool air, the city wrapping around me like an old friend. My phone buzzes again as I slide into my car. A text from Ethan Brooks, 45, my lawyer, and the one man I trust with my life. It's done, it reads. He can't sell what he no longer owns. Relief washes over me, sharp and sudden, like an invisible chain snapping in two. James thought he was the one controlling the game. He has no idea I have been dealing the cards for months. The engine hums to life, and I pull onto the street, the golden light bleeding into dusk, the skyline glowing strangely beautiful this evening. He thinks he can walk away, take everything I've built, leave me with nothing but a divorce decree and a smug grin. He's wrong. I've been watching, waiting, planning, every move he made, every lie he told, I've turned it into my weapon. I drive toward the mansion we once called home, the stone-paved driveway waiting ahead, its shadows stretching long under the fading sun. James will be there, lounging in his favorite chair, convinced he's won. He has no clue that while he was plotting his betrayal with Nicole, I was already writing the ending, one where he loses everything, and I rise higher than ever. The city fades behind me, headlights cutting through the twilight, and I feel it. A triumphant undercurrent, quiet but unshakable. This isn't over. It's just beginning. The mansion looms ahead as I pull into the driveway, its stone facade bathed in the last gasps of dusk. A place that once felt like home, but now stands as nothing more than a stage for what's about to unfold. I step through the heavy wooden doors, the rhythmic clicks of my heels echoing through the silent space, a sound that cuts sharper than any words I could say. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of polished oak and the faint tang of red wine, James's signature. There he is, exactly where I knew he'd be, lounging in his favorite armchair, swirling a glass in his hand like a king on a throne he doesn't deserve. Beside him, Nicole stands by the window, arms crossed, her tight red dress a stark slash of color under the chandelier's warm glow. The confidence she once carried so effortlessly has frayed at the edges. I can see it in the way her fingers twitch, the way her eyes flicker toward me. James's lips curl into a condescending smile the moment he spots me, his head tilting slightly as if appraising a defeated opponent. "Daria, you're finally home," he says, his voice dripping with satisfaction, a tone I've heard 100 times when he thinks he's closed a deal or broken someone. "I assume you've had time to think things over." I don't rush to answer. Instead, I place my bag on the table with deliberate care, the soft thud of leather against wood punctuating the silence. And take a seat across from him, my posture relaxed, but my gaze steady. He's expecting tears, a scream, something to feed his ego. But I've never been one to give him what he wants. Not tonight, not ever. The chandelier hums faintly overhead, casting shadows that dance across his smug face, and I let the moment stretch, my calm a weapon he doesn't yet understand. This isn't his victory lap. It's mine. I reach into my briefcase, pulling out a thick stack of documents, and place them on the table with a decisive thud that makes Nicole flinch. James narrows his eyes, glancing at the papers, then back at me, his grin faltering just enough to notice. "What is this?" he asks, his voice strained, the first hint of uncertainty creeping in. I intertwine my fingers, offering him a calm smile that doesn't reach my eyes. "The truth," I say, my tone light but edged with steel, "and I think you should read it before you continue your performance." He hesitates, then picks up the stack, flipping through the first few pages. Shareholder agreements, signatures, dates, and I watch as the color drains from his face, the wine glass stilling in his hand. Nicole shifts uneasily, her gaze darting between us, her red dress suddenly too bright, too loud in the dimming room. "According to the agreement we signed 5 years ago," I begin, reading slowly from a single sheet. I slide toward him. "No sale or transfer of shares can occur without the approval of all primary stakeholders." I pause, locking eyes with him. And as you can see, I now hold the majority stake, 60%. James blinks, his mouth opening then closing, as if the words refuse to form. "That's impossible," he mutters, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I own 55% of the shares." I shake my head, cutting him off with a faint tilt of my head. "You used to own 55%. But while you were busy with your personal affairs," I glance at Nicole, her face paling, "I quietly acquired the rest from other investors." A heavy silence fills the room, thick and suffocating, and I lean back in my chair, letting it settle. Nicole finally speaks, her voice wavering, losing its usual sharpness. "James," she says, stepping closer, panic spreading across her features. He doesn't look at her. His eyes are locked on me, hard and searching. I tilt my head again, my smile widening just a fraction. "Looks like he told you exactly what you wanted to hear, Nicole." She shakes her head, stepping back, her heels clicking faintly against the hardwood. And I see it, the moment she realizes she's boarded a sinking ship. James grips the papers tighter, knuckles whitening, but I stay still, my calm unshaken. He thought he'd outplayed me. He's only just starting to see how wrong he was. I retrieve another set of documents from my briefcase, placing them gently in front of him, the rustle of paper loud in the stillness. "But this is where things get interesting," I say, my voice slow but razor-sharp, each word deliberate. "Do you remember the $1,200,000 that mysteriously disappeared from the company's internal investment fund?" James freezes, his jaw clenching, and Nicole's gasp is soft but audible, a crack in her crumbling facade. "Or those contracts you signed with a shell consulting firm in Hong Kong?" I lean forward slightly, my tone dropping to ice-cold precision. "That's called financial fraud, James. I pull out another stack, sliding it across the table. Bank records, transaction logs, emails, and watch his eyes widen, the smugness draining away like water through a sieve. I have records of every suspicious transaction you've made over the past 3 years, I continue, my voice steady, unrelenting. There's enough evidence here to trigger a full-scale investigation by the SEC and IRS. And guess what? I pause, letting the weight sink in, my gaze never leaving his. I already sent a copy to Ethan this morning. James shoots to his feet, slamming his fist onto the table, the wine glass tipping and spilling red across the wood, a fitting stain. You dare, he starts, but I stand too, cutting him off with a single raised hand. Dare to do what, James? Let you start over with Nicole while burning everything behind you? My words are calm, measured, but they slice through his rage. Did you really think I was that naive? Nicole steps back again, her breath hitching, and before James can respond, she grabs her purse, her movements frantic. You lied to me, she nearly screams, her voice trembling with desperation. You promised me everything would be fine. She doesn't wait for his reply. Her heels clatter toward the door, and it slams shut behind her, the sound reverberating through the silent space. James stands there, his face contorted in a mix of rage and despair, the spilled wine pooling around the papers. I shrug, picking up the final stack and setting it down with a soft tap. Tomorrow, the board will hold an emergency meeting, I say, my tone almost gentle now. And you won't need to attend. You're out. He stares at me, still unable to process the collapse, and I turn toward the door, my heels clicking once more. This isn't just a win, it's the end of his game and the start of mine. I step into my office, the door clicking shut behind me, sealing out the night as city lights reflect off the floor-to-ceiling glass like a constellation trapped in a mirror. The glow from my computer screen flickers steadily, lines of data scrolling across the monitor. Numbers, transactions, emails, all systematically extracted and displayed. A digital net I've been weaving for over a year. I settle into my chair, the leather cool against my skin, and take a slow sip of wine, the rich taste grounding me as I open an encrypted file. A long password, 16 characters, alphanumeric, uncrackable, unlocks the system, and the screen floods with evidence. $3,800,000 siphoned from Mitchell Ventures' internal investment fund, funneled into anonymous accounts I've traced to tax havens, the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore. Phantom contracts bloom next, hundreds of thousands paid to consulting firms that don't exist. Their address is nothing but P.O. boxes in Hong Kong. My fingers hover over the keyboard, steady and sure as I click on a file, an audio recording extracted from the company's security system, a little gift from my cybersecurity days. James's voice spills out, clear and unmistakable. We'll keep pulling money from the company in small amounts. No one will notice. Once the sale goes through, we'll have enough to leave and no one will be able to trace it. I hit pause, the words hanging in the air, and a smirk tugs at my lips. He forgot one critical detail. I'm not just his wife. I'm the expert who built the systems he thought he could manipulate. Before co-founding Mitchell Ventures with him, I worked for a tech giant, specializing in financial security, dissecting fraud like this for breakfast. He didn't stand a chance. The real-time financial interface blinks to life, and I watch James make one last desperate attempt to move the remaining funds overseas. $500,000. A pitiful lifeline. Not so fast, James. I activate the security override, a protocol I designed years ago, and within seconds a red alert pops up. Transaction failed. Account temporarily locked. My phone buzzes, Ethan's name lighting the screen. Daria, he says, his voice ringing with excitement, I just got confirmation from the SEC. They've received all the documents you sent. They're launching an immediate investigation. The IRS is involved, too. James, won't escape this. I tap my pen lightly against the desk, the faint rhythm syncing with the city's pulse beyond the window. Good, I reply, calm as ever. I want them to scrutinize every transaction, every contract he's signed in the past 2 years. Ethan chuckles. They won't let him off the hook. I end the call, the wine glass cool in my hand, and feel an unusual peace settle over me. His empire's crumbling, and I'm the one holding the hammer. Somewhere across town, James stumbles out of a luxury hotel elevator, his tie loosened, his face pale from exhaustion, a man unraveling thread by thread. I don't need to see it to know it's happening. I can picture him, 42 and frantic, hands trembling as he pulls out his phone, dialing numbers that won't answer. His personal attorney, gone silent. His financial advisor, cut off. Business partners, all withdrawing like rats from a flood. I lean back in my chair. The city lights a steady glow beyond the glass, and imagine the crushing pressure tightening around his chest as he rushes through the hotel's back entrance. A sleek black car waits, engine humming, and he throws himself into the back seat, slamming the door shut. I need a flight to Switzerland. Immediately, he snaps, voice hoarse. The driver glances at the rearview mirror, calm as stone. Mr. Carter, I think you should check the news before heading to the airport. James frowns, fumbling with his phone, and opens his banking app. A notification flares. Account frozen. Contact your bank for further details. His breathing grows shallow, panicked, and he tries another login, a secret account, one he thought I'd never find. Account locked under financial investigation order. He slams his fist against the seat, a guttural sound escaping him, every escape route severed by the system I built. Meanwhile, Nicole's on her own trajectory, walking briskly down a sidewalk, clutching her handbag like a shield, her fingers trembling as she dials James's number, straight to voicemail. A taxi pulls up, and she climbs in, voice tight. JFK Airport. Her phone vibrates before the car moves, a message from her attorney. Nicole, if you're tied to Carter's accounts, cooperate with the authorities. The FBI's involved. Cold sweat beads on her forehead, and her eyes dart to another message. The one she sent me hours ago, a desperate plea. She presses call, her voice shaking when I answer. Daria, I have information on James. I'm willing to turn over everything, as long as I get protection. I let the silence stretch, my tone calm, but razor sharp when I finally speak. Good. Send me everything, and don't even think about running. I'll know. She trembles as I hang up, and I smirk, sipping my wine. They're scrambling, but I'm still one step ahead. I step into the grand hall of the Manhattan Hotel, the annual financial summit in full swing, the long carpeted aisle stretching before me like a runway to the speaker stage. All eyes turn my way, executives, investors, reporters, and I feel the weight of their curiosity, their tension, as my heels sink into the plush red. I'm no longer Mrs. Carter, the shadow behind James. I'm Daria Mitchell, 38 and unyielding, and today I'll tear down everything he built on lies. The massive LED screen behind me lights up with bold words. The truth about Mitchell Ventures, what the market needs to know. The crowd falls silent, a ripple of glances exchanged, and I take the podium, hands resting on the cold wooden surface, the spotlight catching my eyes. Fierce, unflinching. I'm sure you've all seen the headlines, I begin, my voice strong and unwavering, cutting through the hush. What we're witnessing isn't just the downfall of one man. It's a lesson in greed and deception. I pause, letting the words settle, then continue. Mitchell Ventures was once a powerhouse, but in days, its value has plummeted. Why? The screen shifts, displaying internal emails, falsified reports, shady transactions. My evidence, undeniable. Because James Carter lied to all of us. He manipulated the company's valuation for personal gain, used investment funds to conceal illegal cash flows, and orchestrated a sale based on fraudulent numbers. Murmurs ripple through the room, phones lighting up as attendees verify what I've laid bare. I lock eyes with Charles Grayson, 60, in the front row, an investor who once voiced doubts to me. "Mr. Grayson," I call, the hall stilling again. "You've received the full financial report on Mitchell Ventures' true standing. Can you confirm what I've stated?" He straightens, adjusts his tie, and nods firmly. "Everything Ms. Mitchell has said is accurate." The murmurs grow louder, and I press on. Anyone who's done business with Mitchell Ventures has the right to ask, can we trust this company? Can we allow someone like James to keep manipulating the market? I scan the room, my gaze steady. I don't think so. The nods start, slow, then certain, and I step back, a faint smirk playing on my lips. His empire's not just falling, it's being erased. I walk into the boardroom of Mitchell Ventures, the marble floor cool beneath my heels, their powerful clicks echoing off the walls as shareholders take their seats. Familiar faces mixed with those who once sided with James, their eyes now brimming with curiosity and unease. The air hangs heavy, thick with the scent of coffee and the tension of a company teetering on collapse, but I carry none of their doubt. I sit in the chair James once treated like a throne, my dark dress stark against its leather, and tap my pen lightly against the table, letting the silence stretch until it's almost unbearable. Behind me, the screen lights up, displaying a list of names, board members marked for removal, and I begin, my voice calm, yet razor sharp. We have a lot to address today, so I'll get straight to the point. James Carter deceived every single one of us. A wave of whispers spreads through the room, but I press on, each word deliberate. He attempted to sell this company without the board's consent, but what he didn't realize was that I'd already secured enough shares to take full control. 60%. The whispers grow sharper, a few of James's old allies, exchanging worried glances, and I lean back, locking eyes with each person present. Anyone tied to him will no longer hold power here, I say, tapping a command on my tablet. The screen shifts again. A new logo blazes to life. Phoenix Innovation Group. Mitchell Ventures died with James, I continue, my tone steady, unwavering. But from its ashes, we'll build something stronger. The room falls silent, stunned, the weight of my words sinking in. Charles Grayson, silver-haired and skeptical, speaks from the far end. "Daria, are you certain this change will lead to success? The market's still shaken." I smile, locking eyes with him, my voice brimming with confidence. "I'm not certain. I'm sure." The stillness breaks as nods ripple through the group, and I outline my vision. A focus on technology and cybersecurity, sectors James always underestimated, but ones I've mastered. "I've secured partnerships to fund this transition," I add, "and anyone staying will commit to this future." The vote begins, swift and decisive. Phoenix Innovation Group is born. James thought he could take everything from me, but I've taken it all back, and then some. I stand in my new office at Phoenix Innovation Group, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the vast Manhattan skyline, the city lights pulsing below like a heartbeat I've learned to command. My phone buzzes, a message from Ryan Hayes lighting the screen. James Carter was arrested this morning at a private airport in Miami. Tried fleeing to South America with a fake passport. No way out. I take a sip of coffee, the warmth seeping into my hands, and let the words settle. James in handcuffs, caught in the blinding flashes of news cameras. A fitting end for a man who thought he could cheat the system. Another message pops up, an unknown number. I should never have trusted him. I should have known he couldn't protect me. But now, it's too late. Nicole. I let it fade into oblivion, not worth my time, and opened my laptop instead, the latest financial report glowing bright. Phoenix stock has soared 150% in 3 months. Contracts pouring in from the world's largest funds. The media is already calling me the woman behind the new tech revolution, a title I've earned not just by dismantling James, but by rebuilding stronger. He thought he could destroy me, leave me with nothing, but he forgot. I don't just know revenge, I know how to rise. I step toward the window, the coffee cup warm in my palm, and gaze at the horizon stretching endless before me. Justice isn't about tearing down a betrayer. It's about forging something unbreakable from the ashes, letting the truth surface like water through stone. James lost everything because he lost trust, the one currency no money can buy back. I didn't just reclaim my company, I built an empire, and the lesson cuts deep. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's success that outshines every lie. The battle's over, but this is just the beginning.